Flames licked the edges of the sky as black smoke twisted upward, clawing at the dusk like fingers of a dying nightmare. The lonely stretch of road was deserted, silent except for the crackle of fire and the distant hum of an approaching engine. The air was thick, acrid with the scent of burning rubber and something far more terrifying. Inside the car, a figure writhed weakly. Glass shattered inward from the heat, and a faint, desperate scream struggled to break through the suffocating roar of the blaze. The silhouette behind the windshield jerked once, then slumped against the seatbelt. Out of the gathering darkness, headlights cut through the smoke. A sleek black SUV screeched to a halt, tires kicking up gravel. The driver's door flew open, and a man tall, frantic, eyes wild with horror, sprinted toward the inferno. "Alina," he shouted, voice cracking with panic. The flames danced violently around the car, defying him, daring him to come closer. He threw off his jacket and used it to shield his arms as he reached the driver's side. The heat was unbearable. His skin screamed, his lungs protested, but he didn't care. She was in there. His wife. And she was still alive. With one swift motion, he brought a tire iron down on the side window. Once. Twice. The glass finally gave way. Smoke billowed out, and so did a hand weak, trembling, reaching for salvation. He grabbed it and pulled with all his strength. And that maybe things would return to the way they were. Maybe she was imagining it all. But somewhere deep inside, where truth lives quiet and painful, Alina knew. This wasn't the perfect life. It only looked like one. And soon, the illusion would shatter. The change wasn't sudden, it crept in like a chill draft under a closed door, almost unnoticed at first. As Alina's pregnancy progressed into the third trimester, the atmosphere in the Malik household grew tense, almost suffocating. The sweet gestures of her in-laws disappeared one by one, replaced by sharp tones, cold stares, and passive-aggressive commands masked as concern. "You're gaining too much weight. Are you even following the doctor's advice?" Her mother-in-law snapped one afternoon as Alina stood in the kitchen, hand resting on her swollen belly. "You shouldn't be walking around so much. Rest means stay in bed," added her father-in-law, eyes narrowing. They began treating her not like a mother-to-be, but like a fragile possession they owned. Alina no longer had the freedom to step outside unaccompanied. Her favorite cousin called one evening, and before Alina could answer, her phone was snatched away. "No need to talk to outsiders about our family matters," Mrs. Malik said coldly. "You're too trusting. People gossip." At first, Alina tried to reason with them, to explain she wasn't doing anything wrong. But every conversation turned into manipulation. Guilt. Silent treatment. Or worse, thinly veiled threats cloaked in tradition. "Respect your elders," they'd say when she disagreed. "Is this how your mother raised you?" they'd ask when she pushed back. Xavier, meanwhile, remained out of reach. His textile business had recently expanded into 2 new cities, and his phone was often unreachable. When they did speak, he sounded tired, distracted. "You're probably just hormonal," he told her gently during one of their rare late-night calls. "Ami and Abu love you. Try to understand them, Alina. They're old-fashioned." Alina wanted to scream, to beg him to see. But the words wouldn't come. Not yet. So she smiled through the phone, reassured him that everything was fine, and wiped silent tears from her cheeks when the call ended. The days became longer, colder. Her freedom shrunk with each passing moment. Her in-laws took her bank card, claiming she'd accidentally overdrawn. They began rationing what she could eat. "Too much sugar is bad for the baby," they'd claim, while conveniently forgetting to bring her prenatal vitamins or schedule doctor visits. Even her baby bump became a point of obsession. "It must be a boy," Mrs. Malik said one afternoon, her eyes gleaming. "Only a boy can carry on our legacy. Our family name." Alina smiled weakly. Inside, fear curled like a serpent in her stomach. One evening, left alone for a few hours, Alina made a decision. She opened a hidden drawer beneath her bed and pulled out a small notebook she'd once used for poetry. She began writing everything down: dates, names, words that stung like knives. Every cruel statement. Every moment she felt controlled, silenced, or degraded. She even scribbled down a few recordings from her phone, careful to store them in a hidden cloud folder, one Xavier had helped her set up long ago but never used himself. It became her only outlet, her silent rebellion. Each page she filled was like reclaiming a piece of herself. The notebook became her confidant. In its pages, she poured her doubts, her helplessness, and her growing suspicion that this wasn't just emotional cruelty, it was planned, calculated. And it wasn't going to stop. One night, after a particularly cruel dinner conversation where Mrs. Malik had mocked her for not having a real family name, Alina stared into the bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. Her once bright eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. Her lips trembled without reason. Her skin had dulled under the weight of too many quiet battles. But something in her gaze changed that night. A spark flickered where despair once lived. She wasn't just a helpless wife. She was a mother now. And her child needed her to survive this. Alina closed the notebook, slid it back into the drawer, and whispered into the still night, "I see you now. And I'm not going to let you win." The storm came quietly at first, no thunder, just the tense stillness before lightning strikes. It began when a letter arrived from Alina's maternal uncle, notifying her of an ancestral property she had legally inherited in her hometown. A modest estate, but significant. Her late mother had ensured that the land would belong to her daughter one day, a symbol of independence, security, and legacy. Alina was sitting in the lounge when she opened the envelope. Her heart swelled with emotion, remembering her mother's soft voice and long-forgotten lullabies. She felt something she hadn't in months, hope. She clutched the letter to her chest and decided, for once, to share good news with the family. But as soon as she mentioned the inheritance, the air shifted. "What inheritance?" her mother-in-law snapped, snatching the letter from her hands. "It's just a small plot, my uncle wants to transfer it formally," Alina replied carefully. Mrs. Malik's eyes narrowed. "So you're hiding things from us now?" Her father-in-law joined in, reading the letter with pursed lips. "It's not yours. Everything a woman owns belongs to her husband's family after marriage. That's our tradition." Alina felt her spine stiffen. "No. It was my mother's wish. It's in my name. I want to keep it for my child." That one sentence shattered the carefully maintained mask. Voices rose. Mrs. Malik accused her of trying to weaken Xavier's family image. Mr. Malik called her ungrateful, claiming everything they'd done for her, housing her, feeding her, deserved more respect. "We welcomed you like a daughter," Mrs. Malik hissed, "but you've brought shame and selfishness." Alina stood her ground, trembling but unrelenting. "I'm not giving up my inheritance." Mrs. Malik's hand slammed the table so hard the teacups rattled. "You'll regret this." The room fell into heavy silence. From that day forward, the hostility turned into something darker. They no longer hid their disdain. Her meals were cold. The house help was instructed not to speak to her. Mrs. Malik began locking the kitchen cabinets. Mr. Malik ignored her entirely. The baby's clothes and toys Xavier had ordered never made it to her room. The nursery, once painted in soft yellows, was now just a dusty storeroom again. And Xavier? He noticed, but not enough. He came home one night to find Alina sitting silently on the floor of their room, her eyes red, arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Alina, what's going on?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not okay, Xavier. Something's wrong. Your parents." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Please don't start again. I know things are tense, but you're pregnant. You're under stress. I think you're overthinking it." "I'm not imagining this," she whispered. "They're cruel. They're trying to control everything, even our child." Xavier stood, frustration written across his face. "They're just being protective. You know how elders are." She turned away, heart sinking. He couldn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. A few days later, the final crack formed. It was late, past midnight. Alina couldn't sleep. The baby had been restless, and so was she. Thirst led her quietly down the hallway toward the kitchen. As she passed the study, the sound of voices halted her steps. She recognized them instantly, Mrs. and Mr. Malik. The door was slightly ajar. Their words floated through the gap, sharp and terrifying. "She's not going to bend, Mr. Malik was saying. She's stubborn, just like her mother. I've had enough, Mrs. Malik snapped. She's not going to give that property. Fine. Then we'll remove the problem before she becomes a bigger threat. Alina froze, heart pounding. You don't mean, Mr. Malik began, but Mrs. Malik cut him off. We raised Xavier for bigger things. She's nothing. And that child? If she thinks she can trap us with a grandchild, she's wrong. Silence. Then a chilling response from Mr. Malik. If we do this, there's no going back. We already lost her. Now we make sure she doesn't ruin us. Alina stumbled backward, her mind reeling, breath ragged. Her fingers tightened around the glass of water she never drank. She turned and rushed to her room, every step fueled by panic. She bolted the door behind her and collapsed, hands trembling against her belly. Her child shifted inside her, a flutter of life within chaos. They wanted to get rid of her. And the baby. This wasn't about family, or honor, or inheritance. This was survival. And she had to act, before it was too late. The morning felt unnaturally calm, like the air itself was holding its breath. Alina was sitting in the living room, gently stroking her belly, when her mother-in-law entered with an unusual smile. Your doctor called, she said sweetly. He's changed your appointment to today. It's urgent, he wants to do a last trimester checkup. Alina frowned. But my appointment is scheduled for Friday. Mrs. Malik waved a hand dismissively. He said today works better. I spoke to his assistant. Don't overthink. Go get ready. Something felt off. Everything had been so tense for days. Now suddenly, they were rushing her to the doctor. Still, Alina didn't argue. If it meant stepping out of the suffocating house, even briefly, she'd take it. She got dressed slowly, the weight of her pregnancy making each motion careful. When she came downstairs, her father-in-law was already waiting by the car. We'll drop you, he said simply. Alina's heart panged again. Why were both of them accompanying her? She hesitated. Where's Xavier? He left early for a site visit, Mr. Malik replied sharply. Get in. We're already late. As she settled into the back seat, she felt a slight headache coming on. Halfway into the ride, Mrs. Malik turned around and offered her a bottle of water. Drink. You've looked pale lately. Reluctantly, Alina took a few sips. The water tasted slightly bitter, but she assumed it was her nerves. Within minutes, her vision blurred. Her head lolled to the side. Darkness swallowed her. When Alina woke, her throat burned. Her eyes fluttered open to smoke clouding the car. She couldn't move. Her wrists were weak, her legs numb. The seat belt cut across her chest like a steel rope, trapping her. Panic surged through her veins. Outside the car, she could hear crackling. Flames licking at the edges of the metal. Heat. So much heat. She opened her mouth to scream, but the smoke choked her. She was going to die. Her baby. Her unborn child. They were going to kill them both. A sob escaped her lips as she tried desperately to move, to escape, but she was still groggy, barely conscious. The car had been parked under a grove of trees, secluded, away from traffic, far from help. She was alone. And the fire was growing. Elsewhere in the city, Xavier was in his office when his phone buzzed. A blocked number. One text. Your wife is in danger. If you love her, find her before the flames do. He froze. A second message followed immediately, location shared. Xavier's hands trembled as he opened the map link. It marked a remote forested road on the outskirts of the city, near the old orchard. His heart pounded. Something deep inside him snapped awake. He called Alina's number, no answer. Called the house, no one picked up. Without a second thought, he grabbed his car keys and ran out of his office. As he sped through traffic, 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Alina had been quiet lately. Withdrawn. He remembered her tear-filled eyes, her subtle pleas. The notebook he once caught her hiding. Had he ignored her cries for help? No. No, no, no. He pushed the accelerator harder. The wind screamed past him as he reached the road marked on the map. Then he saw it. Smoke. Flames in the distance. Her car, engulfed in fire. No, he roared, jumping out before the engine had fully stopped. He sprinted toward the blaze, heat slamming into him like a wall. Alina. He didn't care that the fire burned. Didn't care that his lungs screamed. All that mattered was getting her out. He saw her inside, slumped, struggling, eyes barely open. He ripped off his coat, wrapped it around his arms, and smashed the window with a rock. Glass shattered. Heat roared. He reached in, unlatched the seatbelt, and pulled her out, gasping, coughing, her body limp. Her belly moved slightly, his baby was still alive. He carried her away just as the flames consumed the car in a violent burst. Falling to his knees, holding her close, he sobbed. "I've got you. I've got you." She whispered one word before losing consciousness. "Baby." Xavier's fingers gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled desperation as he tore through the narrow backroads. His heart thundered louder than the engine, every second a weight pressing harder on his chest. The location on his phone glowed like a curse, the red dot unmoving on a blank stretch of land at the city's edge. How had it come to this? Days ago, he'd noticed the change in Alina, her distant eyes, her cautious voice, the way she flinched when his parents spoke too harshly. He hadn't wanted to believe it. Had told himself it was just stress, just hormones. But something in his gut had whispered protect her. So he had done what he thought was harmless, installed a small GPS tracker in her car, hidden behind the dashboard. Just in case. And now, that decision might be the only thing that could save her life. As he turned the last corner, smoke rose in thick plumes above the trees like a signal of doom. His heart stopped. Her car. It was fully engulfed in flames, the metal groaning, fire roaring like a monster set free. The heat hit him like a slap, but he didn't stop. He slammed the door of his SUV, racing toward the inferno. Alina. He could barely see through the smoke, but then, there. A faint movement inside. Ha! She was slumped against the passenger seat, her arm twitching weakly, head lolling to the side. Her face was pale, eyes half closed. He didn't think. Didn't hesitate. He ran to the side, wrapped his arms in his jacket, and picked up a large rock from the ground. With a scream of rage and fear, he smashed it into the window. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the glass shattered inward, releasing a wave of choking smoke. "Hold on, Alina," he murmured through clenched teeth. He reached in, ignoring the shards that sliced his arms, and unbuckled the seatbelt. Her body was limp, heavy with pregnancy and unconsciousness. He pulled her out inch by inch, coughing violently as the flames flared. Finally, she collapsed into his arms. He staggered back, holding her close, falling to his knees on the dirt road just as the fire surged behind them. Her belly pressed against his chest, and he prayed, screamed, begged. "Someone help." As if in answer, sirens split the air moments later. A passing motorist had seen the fire and called for help. An ambulance screeched to a halt, and 2 medics jumped out. "She's pregnant," Xavier shouted, his voice hoarse. "She's unconscious, barely breathing." They lifted Alina onto a stretcher, checking vitals, placing an oxygen mask over her face. One of the medics turned to Xavier. "She's alive, but weak. We need to get her to the hospital, now." "What about the baby?" he asked, eyes wild. "We can't say yet. But she's fighting." Xavier climbed into the ambulance, refusing to let go of her hand. His clothes were stained with soot and blood, but he didn't care. All that mattered was her life. Their baby's life. The vehicle sped through the streets, sirens blaring. Inside, Alina's chest rose and fell slowly. Her fingers twitched in his grasp. He leaned in, his forehead touching hers. "Stay with me, Alina. Please. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have protected you sooner." Her breathing remained shallow, but steady. Outside, the city flew by in a blur. Inside, a silent vow was made. He had pulled her from the flames, but now, he would fight everything to keep her alive. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Soft beeping from a heart monitor filled the quiet room like a steady rhythm of survival. Sunlight filtered through the pale curtains, casting a golden hue over the woman lying motionless on the hospital bed. Alina stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and slow, as her mind clawed its way out of the fog. Pain struck first, dull and burning, across her arms, her side, her legs. But beneath it, beneath the ache and exhaustion, she felt something more: movement. A flutter from within. The baby. Her hand shot to her belly. A nurse noticed and rushed over. "You're awake," she said gently. "You're okay. So is the baby." Strong heartbeat. A miracle. Tears slid silently from Alina's eyes. Relief poured over her like rain on parched earth. She had made it. They both had. Minutes later, the door opened. Xavier stood there, eyes bloodshot, clothes crumpled, his face hollowed by guilt. For a second, he didn't move. He just stared at her, as if afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. Then he rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her bed, grabbing her hand. "Alina. I'm so sorry." She looked at him, still dazed. "You found me. I should have listened," he choked out. I saw you breaking, and I kept brushing it off. I let them get close to killing you." She touched his face weakly. "You saved me. I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered. "But I swear, I'll never leave you unprotected again. Never." Alina took a deep breath, her voice fragile but clear. "There's something you need to know. Everything. What they did. It wasn't new. It didn't start yesterday." And she told him. Everything. From the manipulation, the cruelty, the slow, calculated control. The threats. The moment she overheard them planning her death. The inheritance. The isolation. Every insult. Every trap. Xavier's expression darkened with each word. His fists clenched. His jaw locked. By the time she finished, he looked like a man who had awoken from a coma, seeing the truth for the first time, and hating himself for not opening his eyes sooner. "They tried to murder you. And my child." Alina nodded slowly. "They would have succeeded, if not for you." Xavier pressed her hand to his lips, closing his eyes. "I'll make this right," he promised. "For you. For our baby. They'll never touch you again." In the quiet that followed, Alina closed her eyes once more, not in fear, but in peace. The nightmare wasn't over. But she wasn't alone anymore. The Malik mansion, once pristine and echoing with power, now sat under a cloud of dread. Xavier stood in the center of the living room where he had once laughed, celebrated, and prayed with his family. But this time, his expression was cold, calculated, not confused. His grip tightened on the folder in his hand as his parents sat across from him, too arrogant to see what was coming. "You tried to kill my wife," he said flatly. Mrs. Malik blinked, then scoffed. "What nonsense are you spewing now?" "No more games," Xavier replied, tossing the folder onto the table. Inside were photos, call logs, voice recordings, and Alina's notebook scanned and time-stamped. She documented everything. Every insult, every threat. Including the night you drugged her. You left a trail. And now it's over. Mr. Malik stood abruptly. "This is how you treat your parents? Based on the lies of a woman who manipulated you?" "No," Xavier said, stepping closer. "This is how I treat attempted murderers." For the first time, fear flickered across Mrs. Malik's face. "I already went to the police," Xavier continued. "The reports filed. Your phones are being tracked. Your car was caught on security cameras near the orchard. You drugged a pregnant woman. You left her in a burning car." "You wouldn't," Mrs. Malik stammered. "I did." When they attempted to protest again, Xavier walked away. 2 hours later, the police arrived. The news spread fast. A prominent businessman filing charges against his own parents. Attempted murder. Inheritance disputes. Family betrayal. It was the kind of story tabloids devoured. But it wasn't gossip, it was justice. The court case was swift, yet brutal. Evidence stacked high. Surveillance footage. Alina's testimony. The doctor's report confirming she had been drugged. Fire rescue logs. Alina stood in the witness box, dressed in simple clothes, her baby bump now prominent beneath the fabric. Her voice trembled at first, But as she spoke, strength returned to it. I loved them, she said. I tried to be the daughter-in-law they wanted. But they didn't want a daughter. They wanted control. And when I didn't bend, they decided to destroy me. The courtroom sat in silence as she recounted the emotional abuse, the isolation, and finally, the night they tried to kill her and her unborn child. They said I was the problem, she whispered. But all I wanted was to survive. To protect my baby. Tears ran down a few cheeks in the audience. Even the judge's gaze softened. Xavier sat behind her, his hand clenched into a fist. Every word struck him like a blow but also fueled his resolve. The prosecution didn't need much more. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Endangerment of an unborn child. The Maliks were sentenced to prison. Publicly disgraced. Their businesses blacklisted. Their reputation, once untouchable, turned to ash like the fire they had started themselves. The media followed the story relentlessly. Headlines splashed across screens and newspapers. Betrayed by blood, millionaire's wife survives family's murder plot. From fire to justice, Alina Malik speaks out. But to Alina, it wasn't about the attention. It was about truth. And the quiet power of finally being heard. 6 months later, the world looked completely different. Gone were the towering walls of the Malik mansion, the cold stares, the suffocating silence. In their place stood a modest home on the edge of a quiet city, sunlight spilling through wide windows, birdsong drifting in through open curtains. Peace didn't come instantly, but it had finally come. Alina stood on the balcony, one hand resting on her belly, the other wrapped around a warm cup of tea. Below her, Xavier tended to the garden, his sleeves rolled up, a smudge of dirt across his forehead. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, gentle, grounded, present. They had moved far from the chaos, choosing a city where no one knew their past. Xavier sold his shares in the family business, cut ties with every toxic remnant of his former life, and started fresh, launching a smaller company focused on sustainable textiles. This time, he worked from home most days. He never missed a doctor's appointment. He never missed her. But healing wasn't linear. Alina battled flashbacks, sleepless nights, and waves of doubt. The fire hadn't just scarred her body, it had left imprints on her soul. So she reached out. With Xavier's encouragement, she joined a local support group for women who had survived domestic abuse. At first, she barely spoke. But listening to the other women, each with a different story, each carrying a similar ache, was like inhaling clean air after years underwater. Slowly, she began to open up. And as she did, something inside her began to shift. When the time came, their daughter entered the world in a warm, bright hospital room, surrounded by love, not fear. She had a strong cry and a peaceful face. Xavier wept openly, holding her like she was made of glass and starlight. They named her Noor, meaning light. Because that's what she was. A light born from darkness. Proof that life could begin again, even after flames. Alina's scars remained, both visible and hidden. But she didn't hide them. Not anymore. Instead, she began writing, first in her old notebook, then on a laptop. Page after page, she poured out her story, not for pity, but for power. Her goal wasn't revenge. It was revelation. The story of a woman betrayed by family but rescued by love. A woman who refused to die. A woman who rose from the ashes, not just for herself, but for others who needed to believe that survival was possible. The auditorium was silent, thousands of women, from all walks of life, watching as Alina took the stage. The lights above were warm but not harsh, illuminating her in a soft golden glow. She walked confidently to the podium, her steps steady, her heart calm. This was not the same woman who had once trembled behind locked doors. Wearing a simple cream-colored chauve camise and a gold pendant shaped like a flame, Alina glanced at the front row. Xavier sat there, holding their daughter Noor in his lap. The toddler waved enthusiastically, and Alina smiled. Then she turned to the mic. 2 years ago, she began, I thought my life was over. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I was pregnant. Trapped in a house where love was a disguise for control. I was silenced, isolated, and almost killed by the very people who claimed to be my family. Gasps rippled through the room. Some women reached for tissues. Others nodded, already knowing what it felt like. But I survived, Alina continued. Not because I was brave all the time, but because I refused to disappear. She spoke of the fire, the betrayal, the pain, but also the rescue, the justice, and the rebirth. She told them about Noor, about the support group, about writing her story. She spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor. A warrior. People ask me how I forgave, she said gently. The truth is, I didn't. I moved forward. Forgiveness is not required for healing. Courage is. Applause thundered through the hall. Some women stood. Others wept openly. As she ended her speech, Alina looked again at Xavier and Noor. They were her anchor and her wings. I was set on fire, she said, her voice steady and strong. But I didn't burn to ash. I burned to light. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Later, outside on the stage steps, photographers asked for pictures. Alina stepped aside, pulling Noor into her arms. Xavier wrapped his arm around her waist. Together, they posed not as a perfect family, but as a healed one. Noor giggled, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Alina looked into the horizon where the sun dipped low, casting fire-colored streaks across the sky. Fire no longer frightened her. It had forged her. And as she held her daughter and stood beside the man who chose her all over again, she whispered a final truth to herself. Betrayal broke me. But love rebuilt me. And now I rise, not in spite of the fire, but because of it.